Hi everybody, I'm Fiona McIntyre and welcome to my first edition of my new web series I Do, where I catch up with my fabulous couples and we have a chat about their ceremony and what the day meant to them and how life has been treating them since. Today I'm with the fabulous Pat and Corey. Hi, say hi.
Hi.
And these guys are my first little guinea pigs because they were actually my first ceremony I did as a celebrant, so they hold a very special place in my heart. Hi guys.
Hi.
Thanks for joining.
It's all right.
Before we kick off and I ask you all these questions, I wanted to share with you some of my personal memories about your ceremony. Pat had amazing Star Wars shoes.
I did.
They were so cool. I wish I had a photo of those shoes. I've been thinking about them ever since.
They're awesome.
And I think the other thing that really sits with me about your ceremony is how beautiful your vows to each other were. They are still some of my favourite vows I've ever heard. And it was a really good educational moment for me to understand that same-sex couples are just the same as heterosexual couples in terms of what they think and feel about each other and how they express that. And I think people have different ideas about that and misunderstand that, and so I was really touched by that. We've actually come back to the London Club today, which is where we did the ceremony. We did a surprise commitment ceremony, although it really wasn't a surprise at the end. I think most people kind of had clued onto it.
Hashtag worst surprise ever.
But, you know, it was still an awesome ceremony, and so I'm really thrilled to be able to have a chat with you guys today. So, enough from me. Let's hear from them and hit them up with some questions. So, let's go.
It's really unfortunate that I think sometimes there's this reputation if a gay couple has a wedding ceremony or a ceremony of commitment, that it's seen as a cash grab thing where people should bring elaborate gifts rather than it actually being a celebration of their commitment together. And for us, I think the biggest thing for me was making sure that the commitment ceremony was something that was really clear to our guests that we wanted to do it because we wanted to do it, and we wanted to do it because we wanted them to be a part of it, and that's why they were there. But it wasn't to be the be-all and end-all, you know, grand, extravagant event with doves flying off and crazy fireworks and
butterflies. And
I think that was a big thing for us.
Look, I definitely echo what Corey said about it. You know, sometimes there is that sort of feeling of, oh, you know, why do they need to do a ceremony? It's not even legal, you know, what's it for, sort of thing. So I think that was important for us, that it didn't come off like we were just like, hey, bring us cool toasters and stuff.
It enabled us to be able to really set the message to everyone that this wasn't about a cash grab, this wasn't about, you know, the fluffy feather boas and the cliche gay things. This was about two people who genuinely loved one another, that wanted to have a ceremony that expressed that commitment to each other. And you know, I think the big challenge that we've got now that we were sort of discussing with Fiona is that if the legislation, or I like to think when the legislation changes,
I'll say when.
I think it's inevitable that it will. You know, when it changes, how do we top that? How do you top a day that was just so perfect in so every way, you know? How do we get married twice to the same person in a way, you know?
That's true.
It's going to create a big challenge for us to do something that is still awesome and still obviously ticks all the right boxes, but doesn't necessarily overshadow the perfectness of what will always, in my heart, be our ultimate wedding day.
Yeah, agree.
we're going to talk about that further.
Well, we were on a very tight time deadline because at that stage we were living in Darwin when we first met up with Fiona, and so the first part of our ceremony planning was largely done by myself, and Pat was pretty much a FIFO worker, so working 2 weeks straight and then having a week off. So it made it a real challenge for us to try and plan. And also it was very last minute in terms of the idea of, let's just have a commitment ceremony this weekend. It wasn't quite that extreme, but...
No, it was, because I remember getting your edits to the ceremony at midnight the night before.
Yeah.
All right, so it was that extreme.
I remember
I was
that
practicing
part.
the ceremony at 2 a.m.
And it was very last minute, in true Corey and Pat style. If it weren't for the last minute, nothing would ever get done.
Especially not for us.
But the thing I loved the most was also the fact that, Fiona dropped everything for us, and we'll always be grateful for that. And we didn't know Fiona at first, and she didn't know us, but we worked together to make the most beautiful ceremony. And one of the tricky parts that we got stuck with was this whole preface of rings. On that note, I should probably let Pat explain that one.
Yeah, look, I think that was definitely a me thing, because I was all about. I didn't want to follow the normal convention of marriage as it was, because I've got a very strong, obviously, with the whole vote and everything that's going on at the moment, I've got a really strong view of, as a citizen of Australia, as someone who is an active member of society, whatever you want to say, it's, I want the right to get married to whoever I want in my own country. I refuse to go to another country, and I refuse to use the normal convention of marriage as part of any ceremony that I was going to do. So it was important for me that we kind of skipped all of that, and were able to do things a little different.
Fiona came up with this great idea that instead of exchanging rings, we could exchange something else. And so we exchanged keys and locks. And we bought 2 very large industrial-sized padlocks for each other, and then got them engraved secretly with different messages to each other, so that we couldn't see what the other one of us had written. And then on our ceremony day, instead of exchanging rings, we exchanged keys with the expression of take this key as an expression of the key to my heart. And then we exchanged keys instead of rings. And the symbolism behind exchanging the ring was exactly the same or even better than it was, to exchange the keys and the locks. And so we managed to tick that box. I was happy, Pat was happy, and World War III was averted, all because of Fiona.
It was.
Fiona saved it out. I think for me, the laid-back nature of everything was what made it so cool. There was literally, although we'd obviously planned it in advance, it wasn't like there was no planning done, because we definitely did plan a lot. But on the day, everything just flowed, and I just loved it. I didn't have to stress about anything. You knew what you had to do. We knew what we had to do. Everything was it was very well, it went off like a well-planned orchestra. And I love the fact that we didn't have to stress about anything. We just rocked up, everyone arrived, we got the food happening, the venue was really great. They also didn't know that it was actually supposed to be a commitment ceremony. They thought it was just a normal birthday party that they were catering for.
Yeah,
so,
little did they know.
The PA got set up, everything got set up on the day. It was very cruisy. It just proved, you don't have to spend millions and millions on a ceremony.
No, well,
you don't have to have crazy amounts of things going on. As the old saying goes, sometimes the simplest things in life are often the best. And our ceremony was simple, but it was elegant, it was on point, it was straight to the point, and it did what it was meant to do. And I think that's all you need.
Yeah.
One thing I would say to other couples as well that are working with you is that if we manage to put together a meeting, or a ceremony, I should say, from Darwin, without even having met our celebrants until we arrived in Brisbane.
We did, like the day of the ceremony.
We nailed it.
That's when we met.
Well, yeah. I mean...
So don't stress.
Totally.
Whatever you're going through and planning yours, everything will be fine.
It will. We did it. I wasn't even part of it, pretty much. I think I was, but obviously due to the work that I was doing, I was just like, Corey's like, well, and I was just like, okay.
We're going to have a wedding briefing.
A wedding briefing.
I'm like, just email it to me or something. Legally as well, to a point, we're still in this kind of weird, everyone's still considered a de facto. So, from a purely legal standpoint, about if Corey died tomorrow, his family could still technically challenge my claim on anything that was ours being the operative word, But when you're married, obviously there's a lot more protection over, if someone goes down, who is the rightful, owner of the physical, the physical property, or the money and super and property and whatever it might be. So that's still, I mean, I'm not worried about it, but regardless of how I feel, there's still that, there's still that legal sort of loophole, I suppose you could say, of, hey, if they really wanted to, they could still challenge my claim on anything that was ours, that we built as ours.
And I think, I mean, one of the ways as well that we did get around that to a large extent is we were also one of the first couples in Queensland to get registered. So we registered our relationship with the Department of Births, Deaths and Marriages, and we had, up until that point, we'd never actually gotten a certificate. But one of the other cool things that happened out of a certificate of participation. Great, that sounds amazing. It almost sounds about as romantic as Pat's proposal. Will you register me?
Well, that's all we could do, really, wasn't it?
So, on the day that that Pat proposed to me, we went to a most beautiful place in the Dandenongs, and Pat said to me, "Darling, you know how you register a car?" "Yes." "Do you know how you register a dog?" "Yes." "Would you register me?" And he pulled out this wrinkled, crumpled piece of paper that it was raining. So the paper got all soggy. It was like a piece of paper mache, and then I think he got down on one knee from memory and presented me
because I was doing up my shoelace.
This beautiful romantic piece of paper, and I still tell people about that now, that it was the most romantic day of my life, and it was the most beautiful thing.
Like your partner are an Australian citizen who has full access to the rights of Australia, and I deserve those rights.
Yeah.
I deserve marriage to be one of my rights of my country that I love.
But I think at the end of the day, people shouldn't be afraid to challenge their own concepts and thoughts on these things, and think to themselves, who is this going to affect by me if I vote yes or no? And what effect is this going to have on me as an individual if I say yes or no? And I think by most folk, you also have to think of, who's going to get the greatest good out of all of this as well, insofar as if a person who even has very conservative views thinks to themselves, if I isolate the rest of the world and I don't think about anyone else in this except for myself, think selfishly about this, as a heterosexual person, if I was to vote yes or no for this, who's going to be affected by this? And the response largely is probably going to be nobody, Nobody will really be affected.
Them.
If you're a heterosexual person, largely the concept of voting yes or no is not going to affect you at all. Really. When push comes to shove. Because you're not going to be marrying a gay person.
No, it's so true though, right?
Your relationship isn't going to be weakened or strengthened by the fact that the gay person that lives next door to you or that works with you is now able to get married and they couldn't before. Really nothing changes. The sun will rise again tomorrow.
Yep.
We will go to work. Spinning. We will do everything that we normally do. There'll just be a lot more gay people getting married. The fight will continue. The fact that even if it becomes a no vote this time around, it's not going to go away.
No, it's
not going to be a case of, it's a no and that's it, we're not going to reopen this.
Totally.
From the get-go, even back from the 1980s, I think, the fight for gay rights has been ongoing ever since for more equality and for more rights. And we've largely won a lot of those fights, and I think we'll win this one. But even if it's a no, it's not going away, A yes means that it will go away, but a no means we'll just go back to our drawing board and we'll try again.
You'll probably hear the voices even louder, because it's got
I think that's the
so
thing.
much publicity this time round that it's going to be even louder and a louder voice.
For me, I guess, if I can put this back to you a minute for Fiona, obviously you're married?
Yes.
And you didn't have to seek anyone else's permission to get married?
No.
And yet we have to go and ask 38 million people around Australia whether it's okay with them if we get married. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's what I put it down to. And a lot of the people that are responsible for making these decisions about what's going to happen between Pat and I and whether we can get married or not are people that are already married or, didn't have to ask anybody to marry.
No, they didn't have to ask 30 million
They
people.
certainly didn't have to ask the whole country if they were going to get married, and they didn't have to spend $122 million asking the whole country if they were going to get married. Someone just got on one knee, I presume, and proposed to them, and then they said yes, and then they filled out the paperwork, and then they got married. Sounds pretty simple to me, but at the end of the day, if it, you know, if you don't want gay marriage, don't marry a gay person.
Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time to
Thank
come out
you.
and chat to me today.
That's
I really
all right.
appreciated your candour and your honesty, and we're going to share this and hope that we can get a message out there and
We would love that.
see if we can make a bit of difference in people's minds. And here's hoping our next meeting is to plan your wedding.
I very much hope so.
I would think it will be.
And there'll be champagne all around.
Woo!